Welcome to this Whole Life Action Hour. I am Ocean Robbins, your host, and we are here today to talk about gut health. Now, more than ever before, experts of all shapes and sizes agree that a healthy gut is fundamental to a healthy life, and that a diet that is rich in a diversity of plants is fundamental to a healthy gut. But what happens when our guts just aren't working well, or when we're struggling with debilitating symptoms from things like SIBO or irritable bowel or Candida? How do we heal? How do we nourish and optimize the components of a functional gut from tip to tail, so to speak? And are there differences in the healing plan for men and for women? Are there differences in the healing plan if you're already pretty healthy or if you're really struggling in terms of how you should eat and how you should live? Well, today we're going to talk about all of this, and we are with the perfect people for this conversation. But before we jump in, let me just say, nothing you hear today is medical advice. We're going to share our own best insights, our own best tips and resources. This is coaching, but we're not going to replace doctors or healthcare professionals. You should always consult with somebody who knows your specific situation and has the credentials and skill set to support you regarding your specific health needs. That said, you're going to learn a lot today. This is a project of Whole Life Club, which is Food Revolution Network's ongoing membership community. Some of the questions that I'll be bringing in this interview come from our Whole Life Club members. And if you ever choose to join, if you're not already a member, you could submit questions for future action hours. So we're here today with Dahlia Marin. First of all, two people. First of all, Dahlia Marin, who is a registered dietitian, nutritionist, and a licensed dietitian. Dahlia helps patients to heal from conditions including irritable bowel syndrome, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO, inflammatory bowel disease, autoimmune disorders, and thyroid imbalances. She combines her academic background in evidence-based data training with her training in integrative and functional nutrition and her real-world experience helping people to, as she puts it, heal with each meal. And we're here with her extraordinary husband and partner in crime, James Marin, RDNEN. He is an integrative registered dietitian and environmental nutritionist who specializes in using whole plant foods as a form of medical nutrition therapy. James has helped hundreds of his patients to prevent and to reverse diseases focused in the gut, including SIBO and IBS and ulcerative colitis and reflux and many more. His approach takes into account family dynamics and stress and nutrition habits and environment and work life to come up with a tailored approach for each of his patients. James has co-founded the first ever 100% plant-based SIBO and IBS program with his wife and business partner, Dahlia. So welcome, James and Dahlia. So glad to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for that excellent introduction. And thank you so much. We're so happy to be here.
Well, we're just thrilled. Everyone's talking about gut health. It's kind of like the microbiome is the new tofu, like everyone say,
the new kale.
But we want to, or the new kale. But we want to get into some of where the rubber meets the road, so to speak, the nitty gritty. I think everybody knows their gut health matters, but actually, when you look at what's being recommended for gut health, it's pointing in wildly different directions. Mm-hmm. You both have your own stories of healing, and I want to start there. Dahlia, at one point in your life, you had prediabetes, you had polycystic ovarian syndrome, gastrointestinal issues, obesity, and uncontrolled Hashimoto's hypothyroidism. And James, you at one point suffered from morbid obesity, asthma, chronic joint pain, and near constant bouts of illness. And now you're both here and you're looking pretty good. Can you tell us your stories of how you got from there to here and what happened?
Yes. So I love sharing this because I always say I was kind of my own first experiment and my own first patient, and my own story really inspired me to advocate for my patients. And that's someone who I always try to be for them, whether that's a one-on-one patient I'm working with, someone in the group, because I grew up, I was a first generation American, latchkey kid. So both of my parents worked often. And that not only meant that after school, I was kind of faring for myself, but also we would eat takeout often. It was new and exciting to my parents who immigrated here, and it was just easy and convenient. And yes, we still did have a lot of Mediterranean food in our house, But of course, that's going to taste very different than hyper-processed, hyper-refined foods. So over time, I found myself from going from being a healthy, active young child to being overweight to becoming an obese teenager. And I would go see my doctor very frequently because I also was sick. I would have upper respiratory infections, ear infections, you name it, all the time. And as he was writing my prescription for my next dose of antibiotics, my doctor would very nicely tell me I needed to lose weight, but not give me really any compelling reason why or really how to do it. As a teenager, I didn't know what to do, how to do it. I didn't see anyone else around me doing it. So didn't really know where to go from there. And it wasn't until I was 17 and I thought something was going on with my ears because I felt like I could hear my blood rushing through my ears. So I thought, okay, I should see an ear, nose, and throat doctor. That's the specialist I need to go to. But he quickly pointed out, you do not need me. Your thyroid is extremely inflamed. You have a goiter. You need to go see an endocrinologist. And I went to an endocrinologist. Thankfully, I was referred to a really amazing endocrinologist who was very thorough in my workup. And upon receiving my blood work back, diagnosed me with all those things in one day. So I was told you have high cholesterol. Yes, you are obese, but you're pre-diabetic. You have polycystic ovarian syndrome. You do have Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which was extremely off the charts with my antibodies. And I was given a few prescriptions and I was told, you'll take these medications the rest of your life. If you ever plan to get pregnant, you'll probably need more medication. And this is kind of the way of life you'll have to live. And I remember feeling so defeated, so devastated. I have other family members who also kind of walk around with their own pharmacy of medications and just feel like, well, that's what you need to do. And I remember even being told that it's okay, I do it too. And I just remember that made such an impression on me. And I thought, this is not going to be my way of life. But I, went home. I was a good patient. I wanted to try out what I was recommended. So for the first 3 months, took my medications every day and somehow noticed that I felt worse. And going in, receiving all those diagnoses, it's not like I felt great. I had very low energy, but I somehow felt worse. My GI issues became worse on some of these medications. I was more bloated. I was more constipated. And it was at that point I started doing my own research. And I knew that there had to be another way. So I started researching diet and lifestyle changes that I could make, fell in love with it, really saw the benefits that I was feeling in my own health, and decided at that point to kind of shift my focus from studying psychology into studying and pursuing a degree in nutrition. And from there, I've really kind of taken a keen interest in the gut and really kind of understood that gut health is where it's at with all of these different things. And so along my journey of learning more about nutrition, that's where, James and I met, and we were kind of each on our own respective journeys and came together and really tried to enhance what we each were knowing and pursuing.
And I'll kind of fill in the gap from there of like, it is going deep into nutrition, learning about nutrition, getting our undergrad in nutrition, and really we fell in love with nutrition due to ourselves being our first patients and going to conferences and reading books and spending hours and hours on PubMed and realizing, we didn't fit into a normal nutrition model, whether that was an outpatient clinic or a hospital or anywhere you would typically find a registered dietitian. So we decided to open up our own private practice. And that's fast forward here, where we've been seeing patients in a more integrative manner, which just means really connecting things that seem separate, right? And realizing, oh, it's one body. And how do these things work together? And my health story is just a lot more quick. I'm a fourth generation Hispanic and I ate a lot of junk food, right? My parents just embraced American culture and I was eating the Pop-Tarts, drinking anything or eating anything that was dairy and tons of just beef and you name it, right? Just tons of refined sugar. And I was feeling horrible. And so it was really in high school where I realized, oh, if I exercise more, I feel better. And then that led to playing more sports and exercising more. And then, oh, interesting. If I eat healthier, I feel better. And it was just a kind of a great snowball effect from there, which led us to where we are today. So very grateful for those trials because for us, they made us stronger, right? And it was overall a great journey, a hard one, but a good one.
Yeah, thank you. And you both obviously had tremendous benefits in terms of your health outcomes, right? As you went on this journey, which is such an inspiring thing because you both know the pain that your patients are feeling. You know what it's like to suffer from those conditions. You know what it's like to feel lost and confused and overwhelmed. and you also know what's possible and that healing can happen, right?
Yes.
So
Totally.
what perfect people to be doing the work you do today. Yeah. And you're a partners in it, which is really inspiring, I think. And that's a big part of your practice, right? You work together a lot, which is, I think, quite beautiful.
We're partners. And that's literally where we got inspired to even have the name of our brand and our private practice, which is just Married to Health. And that's really what we want people to do is make a long-term commitment, whether you call it marriage or whatever you want to call it. It's just a catchy name, but overall make that commitment where you might have ups and downs, but overall you're going to be married to your health journey and see it through, because there's so much light on the end of that tunnel for sure.
Yeah. People are talking about the microbiome all the time. And some people think of that as just, they think about their gut and they think about the inside of their body, but it's more than that. How do you define or think about the microbiome?
Do you want me to take this one? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with the microbiome, so there's really two terms that we hear: the microbiota, which is really the population. You can think of the bacteria, think of the protozoa, the archaea, the fungi, as this microbiota, which is the population of all the different, we're talking trillions and trillions of microbes. The microbiome includes that population and also their genetic material and what they contribute. So that's where the microbiome has been very popular, and we've been hearing it a lot because we're realizing, oh wow, we have a whole nother set of DNA in our body, to the point where we're recategorizing or just creating this new language that we're hearing a lot of, where we're no longer organisms. We're what's called superorganisms. We're organisms that house many other organisms. So it's really, really cool. And the microbiome is just another cool way to say, these are all the organisms and their DNA and what they do in and on our body.
Mm-hmm. And I like to kind of think of it just in a little bit more of a real life scenario, where you can think of it almost like a city. So in a city, you need to have the right structure and infrastructure. You need to also have enough of a rich population. And then you need to ensure that there's enough function there. So you want to think of it as a city is set up, and then there are different inhabitants of the city. You have all important members and all important people. So you have doctors, you have janitors, you have teachers, you have children, you have adults, and we all serve a purpose in this beautiful community. And then you want to also understand the abundance of each type of person, right? You don't want to have a city that's all doctors, or you don't want to have a bunch of sanitation workers. You want to make sure that there's really good balance there. And so that entire world is what encompasses that concept of the microbiome and the microbiota. And, I think people think, well, let's just add more microbes. Let's take probiotics. And, I think the analogy that I recently heard that I thought was really cool for this is, yes, probiotics can be helpful. Think of it almost like a tourist who's going to stimulate the local economy when they're there visiting. But once they leave, they take their money with them. So yes, you might feel benefits from taking probiotic capsules, but once they're gone, you want to ask yourself, how do I keep that stimulation going? How do I make sure that we keep that revenue going? We keep others coming back. And so we love kind of thinking about what we can do with everyday lifestyle rather than relying on pills and potions and all these other types of things.
Absolutely. And we're going to go a lot deeper into that. But since you just mentioned probiotic pills and potions, let me ask you, for somebody who does want that tourist revenue, for somebody who does want, to stimulate or to enhance some of the so-called good bacteria, are there, I think a lot of types seem like they're just a waste of money because they die on the way through. But are there any tips about time of day, with a meal, without a meal, what to look for? Should people take like the fermented coconut kefir from Inner Echo, or should they be taking capsules that maybe can get a little deeper before they break down? Like, what are the tips for any value people might get from probiotics?
That's a great question. And there are literally thousands of strains of probiotics. So it would almost be impossible to say this one probiotic works for everybody, right? All three of us, every single person, just like we have our own unique DNA, we have our own unique microbiome as well, and microbial DNA. So really you want to start with food first. And that's what we're all about as dietitians, but healthcare practitioners. And I like to start with probiotic rich foods. And we know that these foods have added bacterial strains to them. So whether that is, coconut yogurt you're eating or a cashew yogurt that's unsweetened, perhaps that's something like a fermented cabbage, like sauerkraut or kimchi. Maybe that's something like a tempeh, which is fermented soybean cakes. So you want to ask, how can I be constantly infusing the different type of bacteria that are going to come in these different plants? Because every single plant has also its own set of bacteria and also has its own microbiome. So how can I invite some of them into my microbiome and have them kind of mingle and intermingle? And the benefit with getting it from a plant source is that it comes preloaded with their own food. So they kind of have their own fuel source with prebiotic fiber. So if you're able to get that double whammy and that double benefit, go for that. That could be a great option. And that's not to say that I'm a hater of probiotics, that I don't recommend them myself. I certainly do. But it's important that you are strain specific, because for some people, if they don't need to be taking that strain, it can have no effect. So it almost becomes an expensive bowel movement. For other people, it can actually hinder healthy communities of bacteria from growing in the gut. So you really want to be specific. What am I adding? Now all the rage is soil-based and spore-based probiotics. Those can actually be damaging for some people if they have certain intolerances. So it's really important to be strain specific. It's really important to ask yourself, if I'm taking this probiotic, am I actually feeling better? Do I notice my stool is more bulked? Do I notice that it's more formed? Do I notice I'm less bloated? Or am I actually more bloated? Am I more fatigued? Do I have brain fog? So you want to really reflect on that and ask yourself that question when taking probiotics.
And just for a quick answer on that, going back to the city analogy, just so people have this visual, it is also assessing where you are in your health journey, right? And that's why really working with a great care team, because going back to the city, your city, look, a lot of us can be run down like we were, right? When you're unhealthy or when you have a lot of these chronic illnesses happening, it's like taking a small rural city and then all of a sudden you're infusing the population of Manhattan into your small rural town, and you're just not ready for that. You don't have enough toilets and sewer systems and houses, and you're overwhelming your city, right? The spore-based and other types of probiotics are also like, maybe a lot of your foundation's cracked, or you just experienced a hurricane or a tornado in your city, and now all of a sudden these developers want to build, but the foundation, the ground just isn't ready. It needs a lot of prep work and maintenance before you can start building. So there's really this context that's really important, and it's important to know where you are so then you can take the right approach.
Yes, thank you. Let's talk a little bit more about fermented foods, and then we've got lots of questions from our Whole Life Club members that I want to get to. So we'll try to go as quick as we can here. But I'm curious, are there any particular fermented foods that you think are particularly beneficial? And are there any that are overrated or not helpful?
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I think that when thinking about fermented foods, not all fermented foods have probiotics added to them. So you can have pickled foods like pickles or, pickled vegetables, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they have that benefit of the probiotic, especially depending on the temperature they were grown under and circumstances like that. So if you're really trying to get that probiotic benefit, you want to assess if there are added probiotics that are in that food. So having ones that have live probiotic strains in them can be beneficial. And I would say especially having ones that don't have added or refined sugars, because I know a lot of people drink kombucha, or they're drinking kefir, or they're having yogurt for the probiotic benefit. But if it comes with a whole host of sugar and a large amount of added sugar, it almost negates the benefits, because we know that those sugars can be inflammatory and they can actually feed into the types of gut bugs that we don't want to be feeding. So I think there are so many whole food versions that are beneficial, but if you're going for something like a kombucha, which can be great, or a water kefir or a coconut kefir, or even a yogurt, you want to try to get it without any added or refined sugars. Our personal favorite, I really, really love kimchi. So we love it. Our 7-year-old daughter loves kimchi. And so that's one that just feels really easy. Kimchi, sauerkraut. We're huge fans of some of those pickled and fermented vegetables with added probiotics, because we can just add them to anything.
And a really popular theory that's gaining traction is, and this really speaks to growing, wherever you can grow, right, in your backyard, on your porch, or anything like that. like Dahlia mentioned before, is really understanding that there's many layers to the food and where the microbes live. They live on the surface of the food. They also live inside of each cell of the food. So whether that's cabbage or carrot or a cucumber that you're pickling, there are microbes there inside of the tissue. There are also microbes that live in and on the plant and in the root system. So what's really cool is what we're finding is that, the healthier your soil is, wherever you're growing, the healthier that compost is, the mulch and the plant itself, the more diversity we're seeing in those microbes. And those themselves are self-starters. Now, whether those microbes will be probiotic, meaning they're having a beneficial effect, is up in the air. But overall, what we've seen from population data is like, hey, the population's eating fermented foods and eating a diversity of plants. They're doing really well. They have less of these comorbidities and mortality rates. And it's going, ooh, interesting. So as we dive in and we look, there's a great study that showed the outside environment, right? So especially the soil really helps to inoculate us human beings with over 70% of the microbe species that we're finding in our gut. So I always kind of say what the research is really pointing us to is that we're kind of these inside out plants, right? Like the soil and the microbes live within us and we actually feed them and they start to make beneficial, what's called postbiotics. So really cool stuff. We're going to get more into this as the newer research comes out, but it's really fascinating. That's why we kind of really latched onto this topic and love what we do.
Fantastic. Thank you. Real quick, female bodies have reproductive systems, and that takes up space in the body, which changes the way the digestive pathway flows and works. Can you share with us, are there any key differences between male and female digestive systems and takeaways in terms of how they may need to eat differently or think about it differently?
Yeah, so interesting concept because we have a uterus, we have fallopian tubes, we have an endometrium. So we as females do have different organs that are resting on top of our pelvic floor. And so that is an interesting concept, especially during pregnancy when there's more pressure there on the pelvic floor. We also know that females tend to have higher abundance and different abundance of different hormones, right? We're going to have a lot more estrogen, a lot more progesterone than males. And those in and of themselves can actually affect the way that the gut functions. Studies have shown that estrogen in females can make nerves in the gut a little bit more sensitive. So not only might our digestive organs rest a little bit differently because we have additional reproductive organs, we also might have a little bit of an additional sense of discomfort. So a female can be maybe less distended than a male, but she might have the perception of much more bloat. We also know that these hormones can change things around. So we know that estrogen, for example, can increase and produce histamine or cause the output of something called histamine. And we've all heard of histamine, right? We've heard mostly in the context of environmental histamine. So when somebody has environmental allergies, they might take an antihistamine to calm some of that irritation, inflammation, itchiness. Well, when a female does have higher levels of estrogen throughout the month, perhaps the few days before she ovulates, or that week leading up to her starting her period and menstruating, her estrogen is going to be its highest at that point. So she might be releasing more histamine at that point. And that's why oftentimes females feel bloated at that time of the month because of the higher amount of estrogen. So we know that these hormonal differences will cause different symptoms for females versus males. And again, different perception of different levels of pain. You also want to kind of in that conversation think, with females, we know that a female can have polycystic ovaries, like I used to in the past. And when you do have something like polycystic ovarian syndrome, those organs are also central. Those ovaries are right next to your digestive tract and your small and large intestine. So if they are inflamed, if they are overwhelmed with cysts, you might have that sensation and a female might feel that in her gut. If a woman has endometriosis as well, which is going to be scarring or inflammation or adhesion which is the type of tissue that usually grows in the endometrial lining. If that starts growing outside of it, outside of the uterine lining, she might have endometriosis. And we know that endometriosis I have seen patients with this where endometriosis can cause scarring and discomfort and adhesions to all surrounding organs. So with some of my patients, they have endometriosis throughout their entire abdominal cavity, and their liver is adhered to their colon, or, their kidneys, or all of these different organs can really become stuck together. And so even just having those adhesions, having that inflammation, that can also affect the way that the gut moves. It's less mobile, so it will affect motility. So I would say females more than males, and we have seen this in research as well, are more susceptible to having more GI symptoms. We know that females they make up about 60 to 70+% of the GI population. And so those hormones can affect, all of their hormones can affect the gut.
And I got to give the other side of that. The good news is, though, because I know it could sound very scary and it's like, oh, but it's wonderful information because knowledge is that power. But your microbiome is a hormone recycling center. Your microbiome is what's going to help you process those histamines. So that time of whether it's environmental histamines, or it's your menstrual cycle, or you're stressed, which can even also release those histamines. And that's why we have histamine blockers. They're blocking those H receptors, those histamine receptors in your body. Your microbiome helps you process and then repurpose those histamine molecules. So your microbiome is key. It's also going to help you with your estrogen levels and across the board cortisol and all these other great hormones that you want, but in excess and in imbalance. And when you have an altered or disrupted microbiome, then you're feeling it even more so.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we tend to see that those who do have hormonal dysfunction also have microbiome dysfunction. So they might at higher rates have things like intestinal hyperpermeability, or as we like to call it, leaky gut. They also have higher abundance and higher prevalence of inflammatory microbes. They produce more of an inflammatory compound called lipopolysaccharides. They're releasing more of what's called an endotoxin. So like James mentioned, when you're supporting your gut and you're doing the things that can support your gut, like eating fiber, having better balance in your gut, really working to heal the lining of the intestines, that can help with hormones or hormonal imbalance or symptoms of as well.
Thank you. Fascinating. Okay, we've got a lot of questions from our Whole Life Club members. So let's see how many we can get to here today. Let's go as quick as we can. Beth asked, what causes the overgrowth of bad bacteria in our gut and how to fix it? She said, I've started eating organic for over 2 years now, at least 95% of my diet. Last year, a functional medicine doctor told me I have bad bacteria overgrowth in my gut, despite eating mostly fruits and veggies. By the time I was tested, I was also pregnant. Does pregnancy also affect the gut flora?
Great questions. So I think that this is an interesting concept because we all can have inflammatory or, bad, if you want to call it that, but more pro-inflammatory bacteria in our gut. They live there in all of us. So people hear things like E. coli or H. pylori, and they get scared. Are you symptomatic? So I have had this happen with a lot of patients. They're asymptomatic, but they go have testing done and they're told my stool test showed XYZ. I have this overgrowth. I have that. And they
bad bacteria, right? Like she mentioned,
bad bacteria, and they start treating it. So they start taking really aggressive antibiotics, antimicrobials, what have you. And then their symptoms erupt and they feel awful for years after that. So you want to ask yourself, how do you feel? Are you feeling any symptoms of this? There have been studies that have even shown things like H. pylori. You can have it and you can be asymptomatic and it's not causing any type of issue for you. So you want to ask yourself, is this something that's valid for me? And you want to ask yourself, if the answer is yes, where did it come from? Are you very stressed? How is your diet past present? How were your first 1,000 days of life? So that includes mother's pregnancy up until about 2 years of age. Studies have shown that those first 1,000 days of life are extremely important to the formative years of your gut, your brain, your immune system, all of it. At that time, was mom having gut issues? Like you asked, can pregnancy affect gut flora? We know that the mom's microbiome can have an impact on baby's microbiome. So how was mom's gut health when she was pregnant? Were you delivered vaginally or via C-section? Because vaginally you're inoculated with these beautiful microbes. Were you breastfed or formula fed? We know that breast milk contains things like perfect food for our healthy gut bugs. So did you get those human milk oligosaccharides? How did you do with solids? Did you have colic? How was your diet? So you want to ask that. Have you had food poisoning? So really reflecting back and asking, if you feel like there is something that's off there and causing symptoms, how did it get there and how do we move forward?
This is why our initial visits are 90 minutes with our patients. Like we really go deep, especially with the initial, and then continue to do so because there's quite a bit. Yeah.
And I think people get testing done and it's well-intentioned. I see this coming from well-intentioned practitioners, but I think if someone's ordering these things for you and they're not exactly sure what to do with the result, but they're very reactive to the paper and not you as a person, that can sometimes get you into trouble.
So obviously it's not as simple as good bacteria and bad bacteria, and what's too much for one person may not be too much for another. But if somebody does have an overgrowth of a particular type, I mean, I would, for example, say that they should look at whether there's any sugar in their diet, because that can obviously feed certain things that like to eat sugar. And generally the bacteria that like to eat sugar don't tend to be healthy for us. And so that's just sort of one thing. I'm curious if there are any other tips that, of course, are not going to be universal, but for most people, like, because somebody could be eating lots of fruits and vegetables and all organic, and there still might be some gap somewhere. Like I would say, okay, are there sugars or even, like you mentioned, kombucha, like it can sneak in funny places. It doesn't mean they're eating table sugar or candy, but there's a lot of ways that added sugars can get in there that can impact us nonetheless, And then I'd look at fiber, and are they getting enough fiber? Because obviously that can help. It feeds all of the bacteria, but it helps create a healthy balance, right? Especially, I would say, the soluble fiber, right? Would you agree?
Yes. So absolutely. Trying to remove hyper refined foods from the diet is going to be key to have better balance, and having fiber, both soluble and insoluble. The insoluble is kind of like a broom that sweeps things through. The soluble is like a mop that kind of quenches things up, lubricates things, and feeds the healthy microbes. And then also working on motility. So making sure that the fiber and the healthy foods are kind of moving their way at an appropriate pace through the digestive tract. So that way they're not over fermenting, and then they're not overfeeding some things that may just be in the wrong place. So some of these microbes that shouldn't be there might be definitely overgrowing. And, I have patients tell me that all the time. I eat 100% plant-based, and I eat a lot of fiber, and I'm still so bloated. Why is this? And usually there is somewhere along the way, either the balance of what they have going on became off, maybe leaning more a little bit inflammatory, or something's off with motility. So we want to investigate, is something going on that's preventing it to move through quickly enough? What is that? And then how can we get your microbes to break down that fiber in a little bit more of an efficient way so you can heal with each meal?
And I'm kind of the analogy person. So this analogy that we explain really usually comes from a great ecosystem. So imagine a forest or meadow or rainforest or whatever, what have you. And when there is a massive disruption or slow disruption over time, like say you have a forest and then you build a city there, what happens to certain populations of animals? They either adapt or they move, or the disruption causes an overabundance of certain animals. So what's relatable to the city analogy is when we build cities, we tend to have an overabundance of rodents, right? So when there's dumpsters left open, or there's this abundance of human food happening, rodents will thrive, right? They're in the sewers, they're in the cracks and the creases, they're going to get that food. And really for our patients, it's like, have you been building these cities, or have you been imbalancing these ecosystems for so long that you've built up quite an abundance of a rodent population, right? That doesn't mean rats and mice and different types of rodents are bad and we want to kill them all, but it's how do we rebalance that? And for some, they could be doing everything right. It's kind of like, oops, I have this rodent population. Okay, now I'm going to undo my city as fast as I can, but those rodents are there. So it's really coming up with the action plans going, ooh, how severe of a dysbiosis or this imbalance do you have? And then coming up with a proper plan to then rebalance, not kill them all, but you might, have to kind of rearrange some, but and get back to a healthier place, but doesn't mean you want to exterminate all rats and make them extinct, right? We're not talking about extinction because rats serve a purpose. So it's really coming to that kind of context that's important.
I think biodiversity is so critical in any ecosystem, and that's so true in the human body. Like we need so many different organisms, and they balance each other and they work together in fascinating ways that are utterly beyond our ability to comprehend, much
Totally.
less manage. But we can definitely encourage healthy balance with the fiber, with supporting motility, with plenty of water consumption, with getting away from the sugar and the processed foods, and and of course fermented foods. These are all the big basics, right?
Yes.
Paula said, "Do you recommend a low FODMAP diet for people with IBS, and if so, for how long?"
That's a great question. So a low FODMAP diet it's a way to decrease fermentable carbohydrates that you're intaking. So different types of fermentable fibers and fermentable sugars that are naturally found in certain foods. So Monash University came up with the low FODMAP diet, and it has been shown to help 50 to 80% of people with IBS. And that is a temporary elimination. So 6 to 8 weeks is really the longest time you want to be in the complete elimination phase, where you are avoiding all of those fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. After that, the goal is to start reintroducing food by food, one by one, so you can determine which group am I most reactive to. It's very unlikely that someone will react to every single FODMAP, depending on what they have going on. But you do want to try to figure out which group am I reacting to, and then why am I reacting to that group of foods? Is it because I might have imbalance or dysbiosis? Do I have some type of bacterial or other microbial overgrowth? Do I have Candida and I'm not tolerating certain foods? Do I have bacterial overgrowth? Do I have methanogenic overgrowth? And these are then producing gases that are slowing down the movement or the motility in my gut. So that elimination phase allows you to, one, find relief and get back to your baseline. Because if you've been bloated for so long, sometimes you don't know how bloated you are. So it's nice to say, let me have kind of a washout period where I'm going to not be bloated. And then food by food, I'm going to try to figure out what I am reacting to, what I can bring back in. And as I mentioned, it works for 50 to 80% of people. So what about the other 20 to 50% of people it doesn't work for? That might then indicate a different method. So one might, with kind of a guidance with a professional, try a low histamine diet, or they might try a low sulfur diet temporarily. They might try another type of specialized medical nutrition therapy, always with the end goal of adding back as much as possible and figuring out why you're not tolerating what you're not tolerating. Because sometimes I think people find comfort in things like a low FODMAP diet. And I have patients who stay low FODMAP for years, 2 years, 5 years. So the goal is to use it as a tool, but not use it as a crutch.
Yeah, because some of the healthiest foods are FODMAP foods. So you don't want to avoid these foods. And Dahlia's come up with a really great, or we all have, like in our practice, come up with really great tools for this. And really the end goal, depending what's going on, but really an end goal is something like a reverse elimination diet, where you are bringing back those foods, where you are understanding, and this is something to educate on, that foods are similar to us in that they have their own unique DNA, and your microbiome is interacting with that food DNA. Your microbiome is interacting with that food microbiome itself, and not every single food, even if you have a fig tree, every fig is slightly different, whether they all look like figs. Just like every human, we're all humans, but we're slightly different. It's important to kind of sidestep and have different techniques when it comes to different foods, and figure out what's really what you're reacting to and what's really going on, so you have that important information.
And like you mentioned, Ocean, the name of the game is diversity. So being on these restrictive elimination diets, yes, they are going to restrict antioxidants, great fiber, and great nutrients for your healthy gut bugs.
Thank you. Joanne asked, she said, I have had IBS for years and have been doing well, but now have a flare-up. I'm wondering if too much fiber too soon might have been a culprit. As I go forward in my plant-based nutrition shift, I'm finding some items to be big triggers like they used to, but had been able to cheat on some veggies. Zucchini and yellow squash and pumpkin seeds without the shell have been giving me a lot of trouble. Now that it's summer, I'm going to grow my own so I can pick them small and tender. However, I think grinding the other seeds and nuts might help too. Any other ideas of what to avoid if one has a fussy gut?
That's a good question. So yeah, I think going back to the basics and trying to figure out what it is about these foods that Joanne might be reacting to. Is it the seeds in the foods? Is it the food themselves? Sometimes the very first thing that I'll suggest is let's try to almost pre-digest the foods before they come into your body. So sometimes you might find if you break down the food in some way, shape, or form, you might do better with it. So with zucchini, perhaps you are freezing the zucchini, because we know that when we freeze fruits and vegetables and other fibrous foods, the ice crystals will expand and they'll break apart the fiber. And then you're freezing it, you're cooking it, and maybe you tolerate it a little bit better that way. You're doing some of the work ahead of time for your microbes. Maybe with some of the fruits, you are freezing them, blending them, or maybe you're blanching things. So that's kind of the first thing that I would try before really saying, I'm going to eliminate this food completely. And then if that works, you want to kind of ask yourself, why did that work? And why is it that I need to be almost pre-digesting these foods? Where along my digestive tract am I having some of this discomfort? And how can I kind of get to the bottom of what's going on?
And this is important too, to remind, like with Joanne here, I mean, we have to know more information, right? Like there's so much to still explore and so many questions we want to ask her, and really understanding, I know we focus on the food, it's like elimination diets, and obviously we're dietitians and obviously we focus on the nutrition, but food is honestly just the beginning. There's still so much with stress, with emotions, with, just mental health, and so many other layers to explore as well. And then even with the food, it's important, it's important to understand that with food, it's not the food. There's no like gassy foods, right? It's like your microbiome has been altered in some way, and now the food is not being processed correctly. The food has been the food with some exception. Like, yes, there's genetic modifications. Sometimes we're not growing food the best, or there's pesticides. So yes, we factor for that. But overall, food has been food for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years. And it's really what we're finding, and this is based on the research, is that our microbiome has had a massive, massive shift, right? We've gone from these humans that lived outdoors mostly and foraged for food and were close to the dirt and slept close to the dirt and all these great things that we don't really do anymore, right? So we've had a massive shift, and now we're seeing how is that affecting us. And just a comment on the too much fiber too soon, that is important. Yeah, there are some people that are like, I've been on the standard American diet and I'm going to go 100% plant-based tomorrow, and they can do it. There's some people like that. We see a majority of the people who can't do that. Like they're like, oh man, I did not feel good. I feel bloated. I was too many cups of beans and I don't feel great. So we totally get that. So it's finding where you kind of fall in that spectrum and tailoring that plan for you. Yeah.
And that's where slow and steady wins the race. So you're including new people in your city, right, new members of your city, as you're building out structure for it. You want to make sure you're not inviting in all of these guests when you don't have enough beds for them. So slow and slow could definitely be the name of the game. So sometimes it's even going as low as 2 to 5 grams of additional fiber per week. So absolutely, that can sometimes be what's bothersome for people until they adjust.
Thank you. Yeah, that's fascinating. And for a little context, the average American gets 10 to 15 grams of fiber a day. The official recommendation is 28 grams a day. Some folks like Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine are saying we really should be getting at least 40 grams of fiber per day. Less than 5% of the US population gets the 28 gram recommendation. So almost everyone is deficient in it. And when you jump really fast, sometimes it works. Sometimes it can create gas. And I've seen that a lot of times where people are uncomfortable when they first make the switch. And so, going one step at a time can really work, because it isn't what you do in a week that matters the most. It's what you do in a lifetime. The point of the week, however, is to set you on the course for success for that lifetime. So you keep taking steps and making progress.
And as a reminder, that's why our company tagline has become Heal with Each Meal. With Heal with Each Meal, we really speak to the research, the body of evidence that goes, wow, when you eat a meal, it alters your gut microbiome with every single meal. So you're either altering it in a good path that you want to take, or you're altering it in a path that you probably don't want to walk down that path too often. And so with each meal, you're kind of taking that vote on that direction. So important.
Yes, thank you. Deanne said, I wanted to ask if it's totally necessary to take antibiotics for an infection then can we heal our gut from the damage of the antibiotics? And if so, how to do it? I suffer from SIBO on and off, and I've spent a lot of time trying to heal. I don't want to do anything to upset it.
This is a great question. So I think it's working with your care team and identifying what the infection is and what will happen if you don't take the antibiotic. So sure, we don't want to just take antibiotics willy-nilly. I feel like I was overused. It was overused for me as a child, where
Totally.
it was, a virus or something that wouldn't have even responded to antibiotics. But if somebody truly has a really pathogenic and very aggressive type of bacterial overgrowth, you want to kind of assess the risk benefit ratio. If perhaps it's something like preventive, you might be having a dental procedure and they'd want to make sure you don't get an infection. So they're saying, we suggest you take antibiotics before. I've had my patients speak to their dentist or speak to the prescribing provider and ask, what do you think can happen if I don't take it? Do you think I'm someone appropriate who can skip it? And sometimes they say yes, and sometimes they say no. So you always want to kind of ask yourself, what's the risk benefit of taking this? And you want to make sure if you don't take it, you're not going to end up with something much, much, much worse down the line. So I think avoid them if you can, but if it's necessary, they can be very, very helpful.
And just to add that very quickly is also, and then taking time to reflect on how you got in the position where you need an antibiotic. We've all been there, I think. But again, when you become more conscious of like, man, how is my hydration? How is my fiber intake? Am I in nature getting inoculated with all these great microbes in nature, or going to the beach, or wherever your healthy natural environment is? You are building your microbiome. You are creating that diversity in that population, and it can be very, very helpful. Again, and we speak to like tooth infections and things like that. The oral microbiome is the gateway, and it's part, technically, mouth to anus is your GI system. So that oral microbiome can be a preview and a window to saying, hey, if you're getting lots of cavities, root canals, you got some bad breath there, that can be kind of the check engine light on your gut. And that's what newer studies are telling us and finding. So you want to assess, like, how did I get here? How do I need antibiotics again? I was in that position as a child, always on antibiotics, and never stopped to assess. Again, I was a child, or my parents should have stopped to assess, like, hey, does he really need all these antibiotics? And so it's taking some of that time for sure.
So if someone does need antibiotics, what can they do to recover faster? So to heal faster, should they be eating a lot of fermented foods? Should they eat fermented foods while they're taking the antibiotics, or does it kind of not matter because everything is getting killed anyway and they just focus on rebuilding afterwards? Are there any particular restorative steps you recommend, especially if somebody maybe has SIBO?
That's a great question. So I used to recommend, and I think the recommendations used to be, take a probiotic if you're taking antibiotics. But there was a really great study that came out a few years ago in 2019 that actually showed taking probiotics, especially just broad spectrum, so a bunch of different strains put together, actually hindered some of the healthy populations from coming back post antibiotic use. So I think focusing on those, yes, pre and probiotic foods during and after can be helpful. Ideally, we want to be eating those daily anyways, and you wouldn't want to stop while you are on antibiotics. So continuing to eat probiotic rich foods during the course, continuing to eat the probiotic, prebiotic rich foods after the course, that can really help bring back your original gut microbiome back, and really try to maintain what you can, especially while you are on the antibiotics.
What are some of your favorite prebiotic foods? The things that you think, are there any that have particular kinds of fiber that you think are especially beneficial?
Oh yeah, so I'll say artichoke is definitely one of our favorites. Resistant starch, so like potatoes, and just, I mean, everyone loves a good potato. I've yet to meet a person who's like, I don't like potatoes. It's like there's so many ways to eat a potato, but when you cook a potato and let it cool to like a room temperature, or we're all about frozen foods, but also leftovers. A lot of people are like, oh well. And we hear this a lot, and some it can vary, but leftovers, that means microbes can breed and it's not good for me. But really with potato, if you do have leftover potato, the next day they actually have more resistant starch, and that resistant starch is a prebiotic for your gut. Just to put it out there too, that the term synbiotic is becoming more noted, just like with prebiotic, where you're letting, and this is really kind of the notion of letting your gut take the direction it wants to take. It's just providing the tools, right? And going back to the city, if the city needs to rebuild, hey, we're going to provide the hammers and the nails and the wood or the clay or whatever you need to rebuild that city. Really, really amazing. And then let the population do its thing with those tools. That's the idea of a symbiotic or prebiotic, where it's letting these whole foods, it's taking into account what you're eating. And then there are some great supplements that are prebiotic or symbiotics, and it gives your gut the tools to rebuild the way it needs to rebuild, right? And so that is really great.
So yeah, James was mentioning some of our favorites, artichokes, potatoes. I'm a huge fan of greener bananas that haven't yet ripened fully. Those are a great source of that prebiotic resistant starch, prebiotic fiber. Oats are one of our absolute favorites, so especially soaked overnight oats. Those can be a really great source. So really having an abundance of different types of fruits and vegetables, but especially some of those beans, whole grains that have a little bit of that starch in them. Those are some of the favorite foods of your healthy commensal gut bugs.
Fabulous. And I'll also put in a plug for jicama, hickory roots, acacia gum, Jerusalem artichokes, garlic, onions, leeks, asparagus.
You got the whole list. Love it. Yeah, all of the above. I mean, yeah, those are excellent.
Yeah, great. Irene said, I've been vegan for the last 4 years. The last 2 years, I have IBS and my stools have been very soft. What might I need to do, or what might I not be doing that I should be?
Yes, I love this question. So I think because food is one of the things that we 100% feel like we can control, it oftentimes will feel like it's the vegan food that's giving me IBS without kind of considering the totality of the last 2 years have been very stressful for us collectively. How has your stress been in the last 2 years? How has your immune system been in the last 2 years? Have you been more sedentary in the last 2 years and your gut motility isn't going quite as much? How have your hormones been in the last 2 years? So really asking yourself, outside of the foods that you are eating, are there other lifestyle factors that are contributing to this? Has your sleep been off? So really asking yourself and reflecting upon these questions. And then with your vegan diet, how does that look for you? So what is the balance of that? I have had a lot of patients who say, I've been raw vegan and I felt good at first, and now it's no longer serving me. I think over time, when eating exclusively raw foods, for some people, the lack of resistant starches in the diet, because you are eliminating legumes and you are eliminating whole grains and other really great resistant starches, that can start to starve out some of the healthy bacteria. So asking yourself, what type of vegan diet do I have? Am I having a lot of processed food in my vegan diet? What does that look like? For some people, it's also imbalance between those types of fiber that they're having. So kind of similar to what I was saying with a raw vegan diet. Is it more broom, insoluble fiber, not enough of the mop to kind of mop things up and keep your stool formed? So are you having sufficient amounts of legumes and of whole grains and of other types of soluble fiber, chia and flax and hemp seeds? Are you having some of these things that can help your stool be well formed? So those would be my questions.
Thank you. I will also mention, if you go to foodrevolution.org and search for IBS, you'll find an article we've written about that might provide some additional insights for Irene. David said, I've been totally plant-based for 2 years in remission from Crohn's disease. And over the last year, I've had leaky gut or dysbiosis twice. It comes and goes. What causes leaky gut and how to prevent it?
This is a great question. So congratulations on reaching remission. And with remission with inflammatory bowel disease, which includes Crohn's or ulcerative colitis, sometimes patients have symptom remission. And so you want to ensure also that you have clinical remission. So your colonoscopies, your endoscopies are all clear. We know that those with inflammatory bowel disease like Crohn's tend to lean more towards an inflammatory microbiome. Particularly, they tend to have a higher prevalence and a higher abundance of sulfide-reducing bacteria, which tend to be inflammatory or irritating to the lining of the gut. So kind of asking yourself, how has my microbiome been leaning? And what am I doing to help reduce some of those inflammatory microbes? So, like we were saying, sleeping sufficiently, decreasing stress, including that wide variety and wide abundance of plants in the diet, doing things like being in community and having those practices in place, ensuring that nutrients are sufficient for you as well. So as somebody with inflammatory bowel disease, are you intaking sufficient levels of calcium, B vitamins, vitamin D, and omega-3? We know that those 4 things are really crucial for those with inflammatory bowel disease. So really asking yourself, am I doing those things? Are my gut bugs happy and in balance? And if not, what of those lifestyle habits can I be kind of investing in a little bit more?
And just to add, with our IBD patients, we do see kind of this perfect storm scenario. And then also with those that are in remission, you can also, there's IBD patients who can then develop IBS, right? So there's that connection. Just because you have IBD doesn't mean you also can't have IBS, which I know it sucks. It's horrible. I know. But that can happen because you are more susceptible, like Dahlia mentioned, in having IBD. So it's also when you're in remission, you're like, all right, great, I'm feeling great. Just for example, we've had a patient who's like, I feel great. I'm going to go to a wedding. And so you had to travel, and that was a lot of travel. Travel is pretty stressful on the body. You're also exposed to different and new microbes and ecosystems when you travel, especially when it's another country. And it was for a wedding. So he stayed up late. And then at the wedding, he was eating foods that weren't on his normal plan. And then he also was drinking some alcohol at the wedding. And so we tend to always remind our patients, avoid this perfect storm scenario where you feel good and then you do all these things you haven't been doing, whether it's for 6 months or 6 years. And then you decide, I'm just going to do them all at once. And then you are then exhibiting more IBS, or you re-enter a flare. And that's what we want to avoid for sure. So be very, very careful. Yeah.
Thank you. Clydella said, how can I verify whether I have thyroid issues when it seems that I exhibit both hypo and hyperthyroidism symptoms, such as unstable weight, hair loss, and tests show no evidence? Is there something else I should maybe test for?
This is a great question.
Yeah.
So I often have my patients say that tests show no evidence. And I always ask what tests have been done and what have yet to be done. So are they testing for different types of antibodies against your thyroid? Have they tested for thyroid peroxidase antibody, thyroglobulin antibody, even thyroid stimulating immunoglobulin to rule it out? Are there any indications that you might have hypothyroidism? Because sometimes it feels like it's hypothyroid, but it can be other inflammatory conditions that can cause similar symptoms. So unstable weight, hair loss, those can all be symptoms of inflammation or imbalance in the gut. So you want to make sure, are you doing all that you can for your gut? And at the same time, advocating for yourself with your care team to really just do a thorough workup, rule these things out so you can make your peace and say, okay, it's not my thyroid. Let me continue to focus on other lifestyle habits.
All right, thank you. One more question, I think is all we have time for here, from Marcel, who said, what suggestion would you give someone who was diagnosed with SIBO/C. diff infection that's caused significant unintended weight loss? They've been a vegan and on a primarily plant-based diet for a year, and they found some relief of symptoms, but they're struggling to gain weight back. A lot of people talk about losing weight on a plant-based diet, but what about gaining weight to reach a healthy BMI?
Great question. So this one's a loaded one because it seems like the thing that stands out to me the most is the C. diff. So we know C. difficile is a very infectious type of microbe that can cause extreme diarrhea. So energy that is going in is almost immediately coming out. C. diff is an indication for using probiotic capsules. Start there. See, can you inoculate your gut with more healthy gut bugs? C. diff also has been approved for fecal microbiota transplant. So FMT is a new modality for C. diff patients that's being used, and various types of FMT. Sometimes it's in capsule form, sometimes it's inserted. So I would really focus on the lowest hanging fruit there, make sure that the C. diff is eradicated, because unless C. diff is eradicated, the SIBO is going to be a lot harder to get under control. So you will continue to have other types of bacterial overgrowth if C. diff is still high. And then that like I was mentioning, is going to cause rapid transit. And so you're not really keeping the nutrients and the foods that you're eating in your digestive system long enough to absorb energy from them. So really start there, deal with those things. And at the same time, you want to add in high calorie foods that are really going to nourish your body and provide a little bit more dense energy. So adding more nuts and seeds to everything that you can, nut butters, really heavy sauces that are made with nuts or blended beans, or sauces that can be made even with tofu. So really asking yourself, what additional opportunities can I take to add more calories and add more energy to my meals? And then what has been left out with addressing my C. diff and my SIBO symptoms?
I have nothing to add to that. She's great.
Well, yes, you both are. You both are. All right. Well, we're nearing the end of our time. So let me just say thank you both so much. Of course, for living your own journeys of transformation, for helping so many hundreds and thousands of your patients, for helping even countless people through your online programming, and for sharing your wisdom with us today. Digestive health is so complex. We are no two of us alike. We all have different bacteria in our bodies, and we're as different as the stars, each one utterly unique and in its own spot in the universe. And yet there are some common principles that we can learn from. And you're sharing that with us so we can all benefit. And I thank you so much for that.
Oh, thank you. It was great. Thank you for having us.
And thank you for letting us share with your great community.
Absolutely. Well, this is Ocean Robbins signing off here with James and Dahlia Marin, and thanking you so much for joining us for this Whole Life Action Hour. We wish you health and vitality and great digestion and lots of good food. And James and Dahlia, if people want to contact you, is it marriedtohealth.com? Is that right?
Yeah, you can find everything you need, marriedtohealth.com, and of course, Married to Health across all social media channels. Yeah, we'd love to see you there.
Fantastic. All right. Be well. Let's do this. When it comes to cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes, heart disease, and other chronic illness, what really matters isn't how many books you read, how many webinars you attend, or how much you know. What really matters at the end of the day is what you eat and how you live. The science has given us what we need to know. Now it's time for action. It's time to implement and optimize your healthy lifestyle. It's time to get results. It's time to say goodbye to confusion and hello to clarity. It's time to say goodbye to bad habits and hello to good ones. It's time to fall in love with foods that love you back. It's time to join a community that will support you in achieving your goals. It's time for Whole Life Club.